One thing that I didn't mention in in my sharing earlier is that we found out, I think day before yesterday, that Ayya Kusama, she was in Sri Lanka and she contracted COVID. She died in the hospital. And it just brings so much poignancy to me around how important it is that we encourage vaccine getting to everyone and encouraging people to participate in using it. So many of the deaths that are happening now could have been prevented. So I have a feeling I'm probably preaching to the choir, but we can do what we can to encourage that. I'm very happy when the United States shares with other countries, because we're really very much in need of this being a worldwide activity. So I was wondering if any thoughts or questions were arising for anyone. And if someone here in the forest with us has any questions or comments, I'll try to repeat them since we're social distancing this morning. Yes, Neil.
Oh, I was trying to avoid being first.
Well, thank you for taking the hit. You and Ayya Kusama, yay.
Yeah. Two things I'd like to share gratitude about. During the meditation, I keep my front door open to encourage my cat to go outside and not walk all over my keyboard. And I kept hearing birds that didn't sound familiar to this area. And at some point I realized that my speakers are between me and the door. And so you were sharing your birds with us. And I really appreciated that. And the other thing is, you said something during the meditation that just really struck me, and I need to come out of the meditation and write it down. You said samadhi is a state of not wanting anything and not wanting to get rid of anything. And that perspective, I think, will be very useful for me as a kind of a hook going forward. It really struck a nerve with me. And I think not so much as something to try to achieve, as something to be aware of as thoughts and feelings come up. Like, is there want in here? Is there aversion in here? Mm-hmm. So I thank you for that.
You're welcome, Neil. Yeah, I mean, that way of looking at it also helps us to not be trying to do something or become something, gain something, attain something in samadhi, which kills the samadhi. So yeah, thanks for highlighting that. And yeah. Linda Ward.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Now I just
Loud and
really
clear. This is great.
good. So I just really appreciate this theme. I reflect on it kind of regularly, and I just wanted to share something that happened to me actually decades ago relative to this. Before I was even a very, very serious practitioner. So basically, it was a kind of a challenging time, and I had read this book before it was very fashionable to really reflect on gratitude. And there's some different practices in there. And one of them was related to making like effectively very long lists of gratitude every day. And long in the sense of, you can't just mail it in with the three obvious ones. You know what I mean? You had to really work. And I remember I actually did this very, very, very consistently. And it was shocking to me at the time. And now I see so many lessons around inclining the mind and perception. And, like I think back, because what happened to me, and again, this is not a time that was easy in my life where it was just kind of easy to feel grateful. After some amount of months, like my heart was truly changed. And I realized even at the time, it was because I had to work for those 15 or whatever things. And so it's what I looked for. It's how I inclined the mind, but I didn't do it like with that intention. It was just like, okay, I'm going to do this practice and really do it. And I can still remember when I realized like, hey, I'm different. Like it was very much, and I think now off of it occasionally in terms of like perception, in terms of inclining the mind, it's hard to state in just plain old words like the complete and utter change. And it was quite a lesson for me at the time, of like, what, kind of cliche, but like what you see is what you look for. And yeah, I just really love this theme because it is very easy to get lost in unwise attention sometimes. And what I realized even also at that time was, even though at the time there were some days I might have been doing it and not fully feeling it in this massive heartfelt way, right? It's kind of like metta. It doesn't have to be like stars and banners. But that inclination over time. And I just love even reflecting on that because it's very, even though it happened a very long time ago, I just appreciate like even remembering and feeling into that possibility. So I just wanted to share that. And I love and appreciate the theme. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for that sharing.
And
yes.
Sorry, and I was just going to say, and especially the way you framed it too, in terms of like deep gratitude for our teachers and those who have, brought us on this path. So sorry, I just wanted to add that.
No, that's fine. You hit on a number of really good points, I think. Like, the way a practice changes us that we don't anticipate. That's really what practice is about. Because when we're enlightened, we're not going to be the same as we are now. We don't really know how to get there. It's not like you can pull out the recipe from the recipe book. We've got the recipes in a way in the Dhamma, but we don't really know the nature of the finished product until we're there. And we don't know really what the practice of, like for people who don't keep the 5 precepts, who have never had that concept, or they just, have followed examples or karma from the past that caused them to not keep those, and then they pick it up and they start doing it and they have changes in their life they never would have anticipated. So it's really wonderful to reflect on that, how we can have that determination. I appreciate that, you had that determination, I'm going to do this, even though, how'd that happen? The kind of having some kind of idea that this is going to help. And that's really where faith is in the way that that Buddhism talks about faith, that we pick something up, we have a confidence in that it's going to be a good result. And then the other thing I really liked about your sharing is that, reflecting back on the things that have happened before that have been beneficial, reflecting back on the insights we've had. This is a very important part of the practice that helps us to go forward. So thank you. Andy?
Hi everyone. Well, yesterday I was like with a pain in the chest, and I was like, okay. I was like, COVID, and then I was like, no, this sounds more like anxiety. And someday, like on September 2, like some friends came to the house, and these friends are like extremely Christian. And then the question came, what are you doing at the United States? And I was like, "Ah." And I was like, okay, I'm not gonna lie. And so this whole conversation unfolded, and all my grandparents were together, and all the assumptions and judgments about monastic life and Buddhism. And even though like the questions were like, yeah, it's because I want to know, I don't understand. And the intention behind seemed like I want to, like talk about my religion. And I was like, it's okay. Like it's very painful to try to convince everyone of being like you, and I don't want to debate anything. And if the person is asking these things, I'm going to try to answer. But in some moment, I felt like, for example, like they were like, okay, so we believe in the body and soul and stuff like that, but what do Buddhists believe in? And I was like, how can I explain non-self if I still don't get it? Like I don't, like in direct experience, I'm working on it, like, and how can I explain this to someone that doesn't have any kind of context without generating this? Because, like it's different when a question is formulated in order to be open to the Dhamma, and or in order to like debate.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel comfortable, and I didn't say a lot of things. But even though I didn't say them, the next day I felt like there was this re-debating. And in my mind is also this like, this is what you are going to find in your country. There's no knowledge of Buddhism and less of Theravada Buddhism, because there's only one temple and only one monk, and he's not Mexican. So it's like all these things came, and I also identified in that pain in the chest, like the pain of going. Because even though I say like, oh, there's a lot of problems and people don't get it, I still wished, like one part of me still wished that I didn't have to go to another country to do this. So yeah, I don't know, like I think my question is like how to, because like inspired on, I just use them as example, like how not to get polluted with all these energies. I don't know, I felt it was like being polluted with all these energies that inspired doubt and all these like ego of wanting to make people convinced of beliefs, and I was like, oh, that's so painful, but I think I get polluted with that.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. It sounds to me like you handled it really well. I know the pain is there, the disturbance in the mind, but having gone through much of that myself, I think you handled it extremely well. Like you said, to know to stop trying to convince, not say that much because you could tell that difference between a genuine question about the Dhamma and this kind of wish to convince you or to debate about it. And it's really true that it's better to just keep it short, and if they're friends, you change the subject at some point. And it sounds like that you handled it really well. The part about the being affected by other people's energies, this is a practice to work with, and it gets easier as we get deeper into the Dhamma, the practice, and also the holy life. Since you're planning to pick that up, that's going to get easier as time goes on. When you're actually in the robes, you're fully committed and you know the benefits directly. Like you said, how can we explain it when we're still trying to figure it out ourselves, or we haven't really experienced it fully ourselves yet? And you're totally on the right path for all of that. So I can empathize and just encourage. It isn't, I felt the same way when I wanted to ordain, and everybody said, well, you have to go to England because that's the only real kind of Western Theravada place. Or at that time I could have gone to Australia, but why can't I do it in America? Okay, so now we're 11 years later or 12 years later, and you can do it in America. So maybe in 12 years, you can do it in Mexico. It's not so long. We'll see what happens. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Matt?
Thank you, Ayya. It's good to hear everyone share. And I just want to say how much I appreciate your talk. First of all, gratitude is one of my favorite topics, and I feel like it's a pretty vital force in my own life. And but to hear you talk about, first of all, gratitude for your elders, your teachers, I can relate to that. I have a lot of gratitude for those who've gone before me and on my path, and my teachers and my role models. And as far as teachers go, I count you among those, and I'm really grateful for what you transmit, and it's been really impactful to me. And then your talk about the struggles and the path to ordination for nuns. Boy, here's what that brought up for me was this, which, if you can see this, I couldn't help thinking about the first free women. And if anyone here is not familiar with this, please look for this wonderful collection of poems of the early Buddhist nuns. I wouldn't have known about it had I not attended the online retreat on the Therigatha with you and Ananda Bodhi, I think some time ago. But these poems, and I want to read one that's short, but before I do, I just want to say that it might feel odd or awkward for a white male who is not a monastic in 2021, to be sharing this, except that they are so powerful and they really are transcendent. And they were written, ages ago, but they're really moving. And I just couldn't help thinking of that and that struggle when you shared that really beautiful and really educational history of the struggle. So this is from The First Free Women by Matti Weingast, and with a foreword by Ananda Bodhi. And this poem is called Mutta, free. One morning after begging for my food, looking down at one more meal I hadn't worked for, hadn't paid for, hadn't earned, a life of debts I could never repay, pushing in on all sides like the weight of the sea. I blinked and a tear fell into my bowl. Would it always feel like this? Just as the moon rises up from the bottom of the sea, a handful of rice lifted itself from the bottom of my bowl, and my heart rose with it. I wish I could tell you how it tasted, that first bite of food as a free woman. So I feel moved just reading it. And again, just want to thank you for highlighting that history. I think it's blows my mind actually that that it has been such a struggle. And at the same time, I'm just amazed at the equanimity and determination and positive energy of the many women who have, come forward. I don't know what I would do without the blessings of the teachings from monastic women in this tradition, to me personally. So with that, I will pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for reading that poem. I like that poem too very much, and it's important to know that the work of Maddie is based on the Therigatha, but they are original poems that he was inspired to write. And it's really, his book has really brought a lot of attention to the Therigatha, the original poems of the nuns. And I would recommend for anyone who's inspired by the first Free Women book to look at the originals as well. And one of the possibilities is this book, Charles Hallisey's translation of the Therigatha, just to see what the bhikkhunis themselves said, as well as Maddie's rendition or inspiration about them. And I think like the translation of that is on suttacentral.net even more than Charles Hallisey's. Charles Hallisey's version of the Therigatha is interesting in that it's a pretty literal translation, and it also has a lot of footnotes about the commentary, which came about 1,000 years later, and has biographical sketches for each of the bhikkhunis, which, 1,000 years later, you don't quite know if that was accurate, but sometimes it helps to put some shape on, kind of what they're describing in their poems, in their verses. And it's really wonderful to reflect on, kinds of the different ways things can be translated. And then Maddie's version isn't actually a translation. It's a collection of inspired verses of his own, which sometimes are very similar to what the bhikkhuni herself says, sometimes very different from it. But when people are inspired the way Matt is about this, then we can really use that as a way of looking more deeply into the whole process of awakening and the process that these women went through at the time of the Buddha. I talked a little bit about the challenges in the modern day. Consider the challenges at the time of the Buddha. And funnily enough, we're actually going to start a series about this meeting monthly. It's called East Bay Dhamma because it's really rooted in the group that meets in the Berkeley, Oakland area, but of course it's Zoom time, so everybody's welcome. There'll be an announcement about that series coming out in our newsletter if we ever get it out, but just so you know, we're starting next Saturday, 2 p.m. There'll be a 2-hour meeting, and we're going to talk about the first two parts of the Therigatha versus specifically focus on the advice the Buddha. So if you're interested in that, you can check it out. Our website will have the announcement too. And I'm really glad that people are finding a way to relate to those early nuns, because many people share the experience that it's important to have both the male and the female monastics living this kind of renunciant life and then sharing about it, because we have different perspectives, and it can be helpful. So thank you for sharing that, Matt. So now the sun is such that I can't quite see what I'm doing. I can't even read your names. So who are you? Oh, Olivia. Please go
Hi.
ahead. Hi.
Oh, is the audio okay?
Yeah, it's great.
Okay. Yeah, I had a similar reflection to Andy over the past month. I guess to give a little history, because I don't know everybody here. I grew up in the transcendental meditation movement and rebelled pretty hard away from that when I was like 14, and then for the last 20-ish years, just had rejected all spirituality until a couple of years ago, and came to Buddhism like in a very clear way. And now I'm going back to school to become a therapist, and the school is like sort of into spirituality. Like they're very into social justice, that part's clear. But there is this kind of transpersonal spiritual element, and yet there's like a, I think, very American way of doing it, which is like to say, you know, we're not religious, and like we don't have like fixed beliefs, and like a little, which kind of ends up being like anything goes. Which is a little bit like harkens back to my childhood, which was, you know, kind of like a weird mix between like whatever Maharishi says is true, and then other people going like any healer, spiritual thing, everything is and anything's acceptable. And so what I've been grappling with is like, because I'm getting, it's like training to become a therapist, a psychologist, which is like a distinct set of knowledge and skills and techniques. And I'm like really working with like taking what works, like filtering basically, like not closing my, it's very hard to like not totally shut down when like things that are said that are just so wrong in my mind, or just so like antithetical to what I believe to be true. Like it's hard not to just like totally shut down, and instead like keep this kind of filter where it's like things can come through, but selectively, and for what I need to learn to do my future job, but like hold my truth and hold. And it's been like kind of like it's really hard because there's this mental gymnastics constantly of empathizing with other people, like that's their position, that's their reality, that's their truth, seeing where I'm at, my truth, my reality, and then also like having so many good you know, solid teachings from you and from the suttas, like here's what the Buddha says, like and it's like holding these different, because I'm not 100% in what the Buddha says, like I'm pretty close, but it's never like 100%, and so there's like feels like a lot of juggling. And so gratitude has been really helpful, like just to say like, oh, this part is good, and like this part is beneficial, and like thank you for that, to just not go into like judgment and like mental like, well, they said this and this isn't true and they don't know this and who do they think they are and blah blah blah, which is like even though it can seem like discernment, I feel like it's actually subtle ill will. And yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I can't say I always do it well, and I would love any advice on like when that's happening, like when I'm in that moment where something like, you know, hitting up against like someone else's belief or someone else's thought, that like it's kind of triggering that like this isn't right or this isn't true, and there's that tendency to either shut down or like become kind of defensive or angry, you know, even if it's subtle.
Yeah.
Yeah, what to do? It's really hard.
Well, I like the way you've laid out the space. I'm going to just take a minute to move a little bit so I can see you, and then I'll respond. Just right over here in the shade. I think that might do it. Okay, we'll see if I can see you. Well, a little better. Can you see me okay?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't even see the clock. Yeah, thank you for that, Olivia. It's really a challenge, I know, but there are a couple of really great practices that can come out of it, and you're already doing it, but maybe to put a little framework. As we're listening, well, first of all, when you talked about, you know, how it can feel like you're right, or when the sense of self arises, because that's where the ill will comes in. That's where the wanting to kind of thump your holy comes in. And, you know, it's like, if I'm not engaged in this from a sense of me and mine, then I don't have to suffer over it. There are people all over the world with all kinds of views, and they range from absolutely correct to the truth of the Dhamma. And Dhamma, I don't mean that's not just Buddhism, right? That's just the way things are. And so there can be tons of confusion along that spectrum, and it's all over the world. That's how we got here. Yes, many good things that we've done give us the key to a human life, but also having a fair bit of defilement and confusion, and probably some real skeletons in the closet too. And so this is a mixed bag here in the human realm. And so one way to think of it is, yeah, you're taking this program and you're seeing a variety of things, and it's useful to ask if this is in accordance with Dhamma. That's true in our life all the time, actually. And then to notice when the sense of self arises and wants to defend your point of view or your perspective or even the Dhamma. And what might be helpful is to take a little bit of time to identify the characteristics of the situation that would suggest that it's important to say something. Like if someone is going down a path that you know is harmful, when would be the right time to say something? And at the top of the list, you put when I'm asked, because most of the time, people don't need or want our advice or our clarification. But there are those few times when we're not asked that it is helpful to offer something. And it's good to know what the conditions should be for that to be appropriate. And I like that you're using gratitude for the good, because the Buddha did that so beautifully. There's a sutta where he says, you know, if the person does this good thing and this good thing and this wrong thing, then they can be praised on thing 1 and thing 2 and blamed for thing 3. It's like, just like that. And he goes through all the permutations, right? And so that idea that you can always be appreciative of the good. And there, in every tradition, there's almost every tradition, every genuine spiritual tradition, there is good. And these ideas that people have, even if the Buddha would say, even if they're completely unskillful, if their intention is good, you can appreciate that. And so I'm guessing, imagine that the people who are involved in this program, their intention is good, and they may not realize how much confusion there really is in their own way of thinking. And I know I sound like, oh, I'm coming from the right Dhamma. And I do believe that if I refer to the Buddha. And that's through a tried and tested kind of exploration. And there's always, like you said, there's that part where I know I'm not completely in alignment with the Dhamma yet myself. Otherwise, I'd be completely free from suffering, and I'm not yet. And so we want to have that humility there too. So I really appreciate what you're going through, and I think it's a really excellent practice. And then, of course, for any of us, when we're in a situation where our what we feel is correct and true, especially on an ethical level, when we have to have the idea, the understanding of when it's time to leave. I'm not suggesting that that would be ever the case in what you're doing, Olivia, but for any of us, it's also important to surround ourselves with that which encourages us to do what's right and to think in ways that are in accordance with the Dhamma. And that's easier when we're surrounded by others who are doing the same thing. Okay, so it's time